A lot of you in the room will already know Malak, not because he has been teaching at the School of Environment and Architecture for the last year, but also because of his very sustained, engaged practice in sustainable and environmentally conscious practice. Just to kind of give a brief introduction to Malaksingh Gill graduated from Academy of Architecture, and then subsequently he went to work in Kerala, Trivandrum with Laurie Baker, where he worked with the organization Costford for some time, and then he kind of continued Baker's principles in his own practice in very kind of very different ways, which we'll see in the presentation today. He has been doing a lot of work in different parts of the region of Maharashtra. He has built a lot of projects which work with ideas of sustainability, local materials, local techniques, and local people. At the same time, in his kind of practice, he has devised, closely worked with civil engineers, often informing ways of working with their own techniques, and kind of pushing them to find new solutions, or kind of push the ideas of material and technique in their work. So with that short introduction, I'll actually invite Malak Singh to elaborate upon his practice and kind of if you feel like reintroduce yourself. Thank you, Malak. Please.
Thank you, Anuj. Sure. Thank you, Anuj. Thank you, Steve. Uh, and thank you, Prasad, for giving me the core idea for this lecture. Because generally we speak of our practice in projects, but there was this challenge, if I may call it, from Prasad to speak of uh, experiments, looking at technique. And it was very relevant because I'm also associated with teaching, and there is a popular discourse on the way technique is looked at. And I have been questioning that approach in my practice, both in terms of buildings and also in terms of teaching. And this was a fantastic opportunity to look deeper into that and to be able to present on that. Uh, I will initiate this discussion by first just letting you glance at what I have been doing in terms of uh, buildings. Uh, I will do this quickly so that we can come back to this after we have discussed, uh, what I have to say in that context. We will just quickly run through the kind of projects which I've been doing. So where is the speed and the these projects are in Kerala. They are different from projects which have been done outside Kerala after I have started my own practice. This is in Bombay. So we have a technical break here, but I would like to engage you in the meantime. Uh, since this can be a conversation rather than you know a kind of monologue, and I would like you to be very very uh, you know uh, very enthusiastic with your questions about this field. And I would encourage you to stop me in between. I'm not planning it to be like a monologue where I go on with the whole presentation, and then you will have a question answer session. Although we will have one later, but if you absolutely feel, please discuss it because it's supposed to be a conversation, and I am talking about a practice which is basically constructivist, where we build it along with the people. So why not this conversation? So you can have your ask your questions anytime you want. Um, Well, I can start with the storyline. I was like most of you students here, trying to find my feet in architecture. I did not want to become an architect. Essentially, with a more of a socialist background, wanted to be able to do something for the people in some way. And the army seemed like the most honorable profession. Uh, and I didn't get in, but I think that was not much of a loss to the army. I think even if it happened, destiny, found a very very nice path for me. So I'm in architecture despite not wanting to be here, because when I was a student, uh, the kind of practice which I was exposed to uh, was the developer influence practice. I've grown up in Bombay, and I have been able to eavesdrop on conversations between architects and their patrons. And most of the conversations would be about how to make it extremely profitable, how to manipulate FSIs, how to be able to tweak the rules to be able to make this kind of endeavor profitable for the developer. So I was not interested in becoming an architect at all because I thought that's what architects do. Once I got into the field, I decided to still do something with this field without compromising on what I really want to do. That is, focus on the greater common good, do something for the people. So I'll talk through my works. Okay. So I will run through works starting from Bombay, and this is chronological. So there is a story in the chronology also, which I will open up later. This is in Bombay, and it follows the template which Laurie Baker's practice is, associated with. The filler slabs, exposed brick walls. This is in Goa, but more or less the same tradition, where I was trying to, further my experiments. It's a laterite wall with an RCC filler slab, exposed, of course, in the Laurie Baker tradition. Then there was another project in the city where there was very less space. This is in the artist village which Charles Correa has designed, and now it probably has come of age, and people are breaking their houses to build taller buildings to accommodate new needs. So this is a project in that. It's in the city. It's an RCC building, but treated in the way you are seeing it. Here's a project. It's a commercial project uh, for an Ayurvedic uh, heart care center. And I was a consultant here. So again, a different dimension to practice where I was not only an architect, but I was a technical consultant to an architect, Tripti Jadhav. This is now a different context. This is in Baroda, in Gujarat. And you can see some differences because of it being a different place. But you will see the same template of Laurie Baker's, where it's just RCC slab and exposed brickwork, that is filler slab. Um, these buildings do stand out in the context wherever they are made, but I'm trying to kind of connect them in terms of which school of thought they represent. So that is a house in a village, and is not a weekend house. That is a house of a farmer, uh, and is not using the template which Bakerji has been, or his buildings have been known to carry. This is about buildings in Palghar, northwest of Mumbai, Maharashtra, and this is a tribal area, and the building is reflecting tribal planning template. Also, the materials and the techniques. This is a farmhouse. Started off as a weekend home, then became full-fledged commercial property, and is very successful at that right now. This is southeast of Maharashtra, up on the Sahyadri range, and these are some methods, some techniques we use, which I will speak about later. This shows my engagement with students at this same site, same previous site, at this location. Uh, this shows that one of the things which I do is get students to work on sites on real projects uh, for them to be able to understand the field better and to consider designing with more practical concerns. These are some workshops done with students. Speaking about this, all these visuals are about the arch. This is back to the project, the same project, and another one in Kazan nearby. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. So, yes, since they are a type, this is again a weekend home. So, I was rushing through it. So, this is a house in Kazan. So you can see some difference in the typology, at least technologically, where this does not really carry the Laurie Baker template of construction techniques. That's why you can see it exposed, and you will see it's all in mud mortar. The whole building, the last three buildings are completely done without any cement or steel in the superstructure. This is another house in Popoli, and the same template farmhouse, no cement, no steel, using local techniques and materials. Of course, having their own slight variations based on the users. And here's another type. Once again, coming to farmers. So, uh, so you have seen a range between farmhouses and farmers' houses. Right? There's a community house of farmers. It was done collaboratively where people from various parts of the world had also come to learn the techniques while it was being built and contributing to it. And then there were a lot of experiments. But systemically, it was taken from the immediate tribal template of planning and technique. Now I will speak of how we do what we do and why. So traditionally, a lot has been written and spoken about buildings to the left side of the screen, and there's very less work done on what you see on the right side. The last technical research done on the subject of rural housing of India was in 1964 by Geo-morphology, and there is no piece of literature on the technical aspects of these buildings after that. After it just has been talked of very romantically, and in terms of also it has been looked at very interestingly as a set of techniques, which is the basic premise which I'm questioning here. Next. So my argument is that buildings are not a set of techniques or materials. They are an embodiment of social cultural systems for people. And the kind of emphasis and importance given to technique in characterizing building types, I think, is overrated. I'm also going to contextualize my argument in this through this diagram presented in a book by Ramchandra Guha and Madhav Gargil. This is called the Iron Triangle, where it speaks of, who are the beneficiaries of a process and who is paying the cost for that. And most of the buildings which are generated by designers and architects are for these people. While the building stock really of these people has never been in history, never been more than 25 to 30%. Census of India tells us that even today there is more than 60% of people living in villages. What is interesting is that architects traditionally have not been working on design for the villages. And these are the people who are having the major stock of housing. And they're building it themselves. And we are engaged in this story, whether it is the rural side or the mass of people, even within the cities, at least in Bombay, 50% of the housing stock which is there, built through some kind of government agency or the private players, is lying empty. It is vacant. It is not being used. And the housing stock which is generated informal. So I'm interested in that segment. At any given point, it has been the majority of people, and it has been a much neglected segment. I have identified 4 places in Maharashtra where you can see they have, because of being in different bioclimatic zones, this is the Western Ghats and high rainfall area, and the rainfall keeps getting lesser and lesser. These are drought prone areas, and farmer suicides happen in this area. So I have worked in these and many more, but I have just chosen these examples to run through to show what is happening in the rural area, in the countryside, in these places today. The landscape, a typical core house with extensions in Palghar, northwest of India, or northwest of Mumbai. You can see a very classic shift here. This is the traditional technology, and this is what is happening. And it's happening at a very, very fast rate. With the policies which have been initiated by in the era post 1990s, there are these free housing policies. So this person has a house and he gets some free money, he gets some money to build another house. But that house is completely fixed up with agents, with construction agencies, materials, and through the governing with administrative units, that you have to play along and have to build a house like this. You cannot get that money if you do not comply with this whole nexus between everyone. So the final fund, the money which is also allocated, is not used entirely by the people according to the way they want and the way they know. That's a classic situation. So they have burnt brick buildings with mud mortar. This is what the people know over there. And now we move to Varta, which is the extreme northeast of Maharashtra, and you can see that they still have houses with country clay tiles. And there are many houses like this. I have done projects in these areas which you have also seen already. I will come back to that. But this is reference material. This is what houses are there. They are like. This is a traditional house there in a large courtyard. It's called a vada. And you can still see these country tiles over there. And you can see that this has been replaced with a GIS sheet. This is happening very quickly. These houses, and these are local houses, so you have villages and villages full of mud houses, and they are assuming an image of being dilapidated. So if you tell someone that we could build a mud house, they say, but they go back very fast. I mean, how do you maintain them? And they're generally prone to fall apart. And it's because this is the image. It's because this is what you see. And obviously, I mean, they don't have the knowledge that, they don't have the memory that this house has probably lasted more than 100 years. Which by any standards, an RCC building which they aspire for is not even certified to last. After 65 to 75 years, it's going to start rusting, and then the costs are going to be exceedingly high. Now, this is a problem of an image which has been created of these houses, because nobody is building these now. So you don't have beautiful mud houses being done now, and that creates an image amongst the people that these kind of buildings are generally dilapidated buildings. In the same place, here's another point which I can make. In the same place, which has one of the highest temperatures in the country, around 42 to 43 degrees, there are houses which have a wattle and dog technique. So what you saw before that was called only mud walls. Walls made out of thick mud or mud bricks to deal with the extreme heat. But here is a structure which is just as comfortable, done in wattle and dog. You can see that mangrove tiles have been used. Mangrove pattern tiles were introduced by the British in a kind of optimization of the country clay tile to be able to improve its performance in terms of leakage, etc., etc. And these are changes which are happening very quickly. Here, it's a classic case again. You see a country tile thing with a cork thing, then you see a brick thing with a mangrove tile, an extension. This is how the inside of these old houses look. So you have a timber structure, at least the frame part of the house is in timber. So it's a composite building. You see these kind of local trusses, if I may call them. They're not actually trusses, but when they are support systems with a horizontal and vertical. You see bamboo supports for the country clay tiles on top. This knowledge of these kind of systems does not enter most of our discussions, especially in the education curricula. It does not enter. These knowledge systems don't exist because traditionally we have been bred up on this, the Mackies and whoever is kind of engages in writing a book on this subject. There's very less research, documentation, and literature available on this. That is again Wardha. Mahabaleshwar is a place which is now a completely different place. It's a hill station. It's a semi-evergreen place with high rainfall, 6 to 7 months a year, and it gets very cold because it's at an altitude. It's at the topmost point on one of the highest points of the Sahyadri Range in Maharashtra. And you can again see what kind of buildings are being done here. This is a stone temple in Mahabaleshwar, completely done out of stone, basalt stone. And you see the houses, because of this high rainfall and strong winds, because of the altitude, you can see that the houses have a stone wall up till the roof. These are traditional houses in that area. And you can see what is happening now, very quickly. These are the new buildings which are being built in this place. My questions have been, how do people make a choice of technology in contemporary times? How do they choose that this is what we want to do? And I've got very interesting answers. I will share that with you. This is another place, Aurangabad, very less rainfall, is currently going through agriculture crisis. Also, through these slides, one can show the diversity of buildings, the same kind of climatic zone and bio-agricultural zone. So this is in Aurangabad. It's a sloping roof and it has thatch on top. In the same place, we find this is what people are doing right now. And you have flat roofs made out of timber with mud on top of them. So this is another typical house type there. This is the woodwork on which the mud floor is supported. And these buildings are centuries old. We are doing a project there, so we document. What we do is we always document these buildings before designing. And I'll explain to you why. This is what is happening now. Because of neglect, the plastic sheet comes in invariably. And they make choices of these new materials because they cannot maintain this. And the blanket statement arises that, oh, these materials are not good enough to take rain. And it incurs a lot of maintenance. I would like to present Amos Davenport's categorization of practices or building traditions. So he mentions that there are two very clearly different traditions. One is a high or grand design tradition, where the agency is a specialist. An architect designs for many people or a user without being a part of the culture. And then there is a folk tradition in which there is no architect. At most, there is a specialized craftsperson. But in that also, the role of the craftsperson or the specialist is not of design. The design is formed by patterns which have arrived in that area from centuries. And the other tradition is the pre-literate, what is also was once called as primitive, but further classification is that it's pre-literate, where there's not that specialist also. The entire family builds the house together. Now, when I, as a student of architecture, wanted to, look at a different attitude towards design, these traditions came across as a very, very stark contrast. And Baker's work looked like was negotiating this contrast in some way, was establishing some kind of communication between these different traditions. So just to present the contemporary status of rural housing and why we need to focus on rural housing. This is just a simple statistic. This is the 2011 census. Now this is the rate at which buildings will increase. This is when the liberalization period started. And we're talking of at least 37 billion square meters of built environment up to 2030. And even in 2030, we will still have 60% of our people living in villages. So I wonder why and how we can, how we should address the needs of the built environment of these people. This is a statistic of India. So these are the major consumers of coal. We are responsible through our design for this. Everyone knows about Harvey. Yeah, what is happening? The hurricane. So the global warming has intensified its effect. It is in the news. So this is a statistic again from the census about how between 2001 and 2011, what has been the increase or decrease in the use of materials in India. So you can see here how concrete use has increased. So you relate the previous statistics and this, and you should be able to, get an idea of, what I'm saying we should be doing. I mean, we should be worried about it, right? Look at this statistic. And look at this. So glass, thatch, etc. as materials have gone down. Tiles as materials have gone down from 2001. Right? And you have to look at this in this perspective. This is a statistic of for floor, what kind of materials how have they performed over 10 years? Or how are they being used? And you can clearly see that mud goes down and cement goes up. Your mosaic floors go up. Even if only slightly, stone goes up. We will talk about what these mean in terms of ecology, embodied energy, etc. These are graphs to contextualize the discussion. Here's another statistic. So you saw in the previous slide how much coal is being used. You all know that coal is not an efficient way of using energy. So 1 kg of coal gives only 3 to 4 bricks. 1 kg of coal gives only 3 to 4 bricks. You know how coal mining happens. You know how inefficient it is as an output in terms of energy. And look at, so the major component is burnt bricks. So, and even today, what is interesting is, with all this, madness about, development and technology, we still have such a big percentage building in mud or mud unburnt bricks. And these two, it's a very interesting jump. That how does this jump happen and why does it happen? These are questions which bother me. And I have been dealing with them. I have been speaking to people and trying to find some solutions. That's a huge thing. The production cost of bricks, right? So at least, so 24 million tons of coal is used by the brick industry alone. And what are the materials used for making a brick wall? You need brick, and in brick, 45% is fuel. 45% of the cost is fuel cost. So you can imagine this brick would cost 1 rupee, or at least say 1.5 rupees. This is only talking about monetary costs. There are huge environmental costs. There are huge ecological costs. Because mostly topsoil is taken away and bricks are burned. Besides, it's a huge industry of bonded labor and migrant laborers who leave their houses, leave systems which have been sustainable for a long time, and go to work in these kilns because they are needed somewhere else. Right? That is what causes embodied energy to increase. Embodied energy is the irreversible energy which is consumed by a material. Irreversible means that it cannot be gotten back, or in terms of its resources which go into getting that energy. Those resources are finished forever. So this is a very high embodied energy material. And what is the difference really? The burning process. So can we question that? Can we see if it's really necessary and how important it is? Another relevant information is you see how migration of brick molders is happening. How the migration of the firemen who fire the bricks is happening. Loaders and unloaders. You can identify geographically that where people are coming from, what they are doing, and this is, you can connect it with all the, there are various things. So someone was shot dead a few days back because she supported Naxalites, and then you look at where Naxals are coming from and what we are doing to those people. Right? I'm not saying anything pro or against Naxalite movement, but I'm saying that we can definitely correct things, can't we? So this is 2001, this is 2011. Brunswick has gone up. Glass and bamboo has gone down. This is for walls, how they're using walls. Mud and unburned bricks have gone down. So it was much more in 2001. Stone has gone up. Something to worry about. Because when you're quarrying, you're turning the biological succession upside down, which means it has taken millions of years to form that rock, but it has taken a few thousands for lichen to work on it and to create some kind of soil on which it's taken a few hundreds of years to form herbaceous growth, then some small flora on that, and then you have trees coming out of it. You're turning the entire biological succession on its head. And this process is only increasing. Leave apart what you don't know what to do with those quarries, and there are all kinds of rumors these days on that. After presenting this whole, uh, you know, data and analysis on the way things have been used in India, I would now like to present to you the way an attempt at negotiating these traditions between the high design. So here's Hassan Fatih, who was trying to, all his life has tried to enter the realm of vernacular architecture and try and make this kind of, engagement with it. And there's an article, and I will also back it up with a film of what has happened to his attempt of mass housing. So very often this question is there that why are these techniques used for the masses? Let's use it for the masses. Mass housing may not be the answer to that. We will discuss that in this way. These are experiments, and experiments do fail. But what is important is that we tried. So I'll leave you to the film. I don't think you have audio, but because they're speaking in the local language, I'm sure. It doesn't hurt much, but you can read the subtitles. This was Hassan Fatih's attempt at mass housing. An entire village was built. Hassan Fatih lived here for 6 years to build this entire village. I would like us to consider this statement as a key statement in today's discussion. Yes, sir. So, so my argument is that we are actually analyzing these projects by the wrong yardsticks. Most of us are very quick to speak about the technology. But the technology wasn't correct. The materials weren't correct. There were some flaws in the way it was built. The discourse is on technique. Even for the people, they are just concerned that if it was built differently, it would have worked. I have a problem with that. I have a problem with the position we assume when we decide to do mass housing. So, villages and settlements happen over centuries. And there are so many environments which they negotiate. Understanding, for example, here was the land. 50 centimeters below there is water. There are so many, this is the geological aspect, hydrological aspect. The nature of the materials, the stones to be used. The knowledge which the local people have about these materials, so that we can incorporate them in a particular technique. These are attitudes. And to assume that we should be able to know everything to be able to make these huge kind of settlements and plan huge complexes or to do mass housing is something I have a problem with. Because housing for the masses can easily be housing by the masses. It is a role which we assume for ourselves or we accept for ourselves, which I have a problem with. And this is where I want to position technique. So technique has not much significance to me by itself. Most of the discourse on technique and technology or schools, literature, practices is about a set of techniques. So many practices are identified by the set of techniques which they are known to represent. And that is a big problem. So this is what, this kind of makes people lose their faith in the set of techniques which Hassan Fatih. But that is not the real problem. The problem is the kind of responsibility we assume or we take on ourselves to be able to do these kind of projects. I don't think the answer is mass housing. And we need to question, I think the answers lie, I think the answers lie beyond the domain of architecture. I think there are different problems, there are political problems, there are problems where power makes people, so why did they have to leave their village and move to this place is a fundamental problem, which is kind of taken for granted. And the question starts from how are we going to build them? So it's always an epistemological issue. Nobody is asking ontological questions in the discourse of technique. This is my complaint. They are not connecting it to worldviews, to philosophical standpoints which you have to assume to be able to design something. And technology is almost celebrated by itself. This is something which I'm arguing against. So this is what Hassan Fatih has built, and this is what has been, how it has been restored today. This is how the people are doing. I will now speak of Laurie Baker. This is a drawing done by Laurie Baker. It's a core house. It's a tall house. Where it shows the analogy here, how it is designed. So you can see a building. This is going from the vernacular tradition. Well, I would love to design a building like this, but don't have the vision to make something like this, which doesn't look half as pretty, but it has the spirit of allowance, has the spirit of giving up your signature in terms of a designer, and providing or facilitating people to be able to do their own thing as and when they need. This is something which Bakerji did, propagated and practiced. These are his various takes on, for example, this is a slum redevelopment project, hand drawings by Baker. This has been executed now. And he questioned these kind of planning methods. And he suggested why wouldn't we leave that space open for the people to use for their lifestyles, how they use open space, and club it all up in this interesting way to. So these are architectural solutions. And from it comes a technique or a set of techniques. It's an attitude which generates a set of techniques. So my argument was to look at it through people's concerns. Look at it through what matters to people, and therefore I call it a cultural lens. How does a group of people think? And therefore, what can you just do in that matrix or that system of thoughts? What can you do to engage with that so that they would not be imposed with something which is completely alien, or just because as a designer you have the limited time or space or resources to be able to understand or work with them. So my argument is to look at technique through a cultural lens, and here these are some kind of rules which Bakerji has suggested to be able to have sustainable practice. And somewhere or the other, each one of them is putting people at the center. Either it is through energy, through non-wastage. It is so that those resources can be saved for people. If you can see the difference between this building and the next, this is a project, a typical project showing the techniques, the template of techniques which Bakerji is associated with. Filler slab, exposed backyard bonds, etc. And then you see Bakerji's house. It has very, very small component of filler slab, hardly any backyard bonds. And you can see the material template is very, very different. That's his house. And this is the project, auditorium. Now, how do you discern the set of techniques for different contexts? If not by considering the people, if not by engaging with the people for whom it is being designed, if not by engaging into the way they think, the way they choose. Amos Rappaport has made some flowcharts for us to consider. So this is what you see as evidence in a region, and you can directly design. But here is, this is the new copy piece, even techniques. But here is many things which you can go through, very consciously identify, understand, and apply through the set of constraints, which is mainly because of the people or the land where you are building. Here's another dismantling. Generally, we say, okay, so a cultural lens. So what do you mean? I mean, the way, what do you mean by the cultural lens? And there's this for a very long time, social culture has been used very loosely. So here is a dismantling of socio-cultural aspects. When he mentions, he describes various ways in which culture has to be understood. One is as a very human specific thing. It clearly is distinguished by being only for humans. That is culture. But it is also understood by the way it characterizes a set of people. The way it characterizes the way they behave routinely. So, although they are, both are culture, but they are two very, very different things. And why the first understanding of culture is important is because we are not just dealing with land or the physical environment or with people. They are also dealing with a whole biotic environment where the wood we use is all biological, biomass. These are all living things which we kind of you know take on loan while we use them, and then we have to give it back to a particular system. So he explains here how there are certain aspects of culture which we can use to be able to design. Our entry points as designers. Whatever the built environment is, we could try and understand the values which people who are going to live in those buildings have. Their lifestyles and activity systems. There is this symbolic aspect of the way people engage with their environments, which gets encoded in images, ideals, norms, standards, expectations. Which, if we research and if we understand, we'll be able to design much better buildings. Rather than look at the environment sensitive way as just being a technological way of saving either embodied energy or using techniques across same environment friendly, so-called environment friendly technique across cultures is another big problem which I'm arguing against. So unless you go through this, which is very culture specific, you will completely miss that point. You will only look at, okay, so you are in a very high rainfall area, so you have lateritic soil, so you can make this kind of wall with that, and therefore this is the limitation of the material, and therefore this is the building system you come up with, and therefore this is the planning it can afford. But people have been doing this for centuries, and you can't take out the culture from their interpretation of forms. So I think technique needs to look at these things. There are various approaches. There have been various approaches. This one is a purely ecosystem approach, where it says that the ecosystem decides. And there is this actor-based model, which mainly Laurie Baker's practice represents. So Bakerji has done what he has done because it's the city, and the template of techniques which he has used is only applicable to that city or in that region. And if you use it in other places or in other contexts and in more rural contexts, you're probably making a mistake. So because he has done things very differently in the lesser known projects, where he has not used these techniques at all. There's another approach based on an anthropologist, Julian Stewart's, where he presents another opening up of culture. He says culture has two aspects to it. So, since we are saying that we have to be culture sensitive, there was a dismantling by Amos Rapoport of how you can approach the cultural aspect of people, understand how they think. Here's another, this was part breaking, where he said that there are two aspects of culture. Culture is not the culturals or which happen. Not only the cultures which happen after, say, an annual day function, and some people they dance in some traditional clothes, and we call it the cultures. Come, let's go attend the cultures. That, if at all, it is only the non-core aspect of culture. It is the symbolic aspect of culture where they're heavily coded with meanings of that particular set of people. And there is a core cultural aspect. And these are the aspects which you can use across different sets of people, across different settings. Where if you're designing in some settings, say in Maharashtra, or you're designing in New York, the core cultural aspects will not change, but the culture specific ones will. So that's another opening up of culture for us to be able to see. For example, how you paint your building. What is the color you give to your building? The planning may be based on your philosophical standpoint, the way you look at your inhabitants, say gender equations, etc., etc. But the way you make your building look is a non-core cultural aspect. It's the coding of your core cultural aspect. And we often end up only engaging with the non-core cultural, the outer things. And then we copy them into the designs and say that this looks like the houses of that area. Whereas there are cross-cultural universalities which are much more important. And what's important is to see how people really hide them in their outer renderings of their buildings. And so we do that as designers, then, very consciously. These are further systems of human ecology which say that there is no only ecological kind of important issue or only social. We say that it's a constant kind of dynamic, fuzzy thing happening between them. And you have to be alive. There's no easy way out of it. That you take a template for one place and say that I can use this elsewhere. So a designer has to look at techniques by looking at a constant kind of dialogue between these environments, between the social cultural environments and the ecological setting, your natural resources. So if you're looking at techniques, I'm using a natural material, doesn't work. Or I'm using something which is lower body energy, doesn't work. Or I'm using a shape which the people in that area have been using, doesn't work. So there are these various standpoints which have been there where people go in either of the extremes, either only cultural or only environmental and ecological. Well, this is a systems model of human ecology which says that it's a dynamic thing and you have to be alive to a process rather than how a product looks. These are various kind of doodlings of how pulling the biotic environment inside this whole thing as well. They're not going to look at wood or earth as materials to as resources to build buildings. They're alive things, and you're using it in your build systems just to be able to, if you are sensitive, to be able to give it back. And where do you place your practice in this whole matrix? And therefore, just putting all this together. So that's your ecological system, social cultural system, and various inputs from outside. So influences from outside will always come in. So you dam a river, Narmada changes. People make different choices. Okay, that's an influence on the ecological system. So you start Baywatch, people change their dressing styles. Cultural influences. Social factors, physical factors, the dismantlings of culture from the various sources I mentioned. Where do you place technique in all this? Putting all this aside, and this technique is just a small thing here. After you consider all this, you could, but that's what has helped me do what I'm doing today. So these are various dismantlings. quickly run through this once again. The idea was to speak of techniques through practice. So now you can look at this once again. And this is maybe 15 years back. Last building I designed when I was working with Laurie Baker. This is also with Laurie Baker. So this is material and techniques which I was being exposed to. But what to do with it was, I was not clear about it. So I came to Bombay and I did not know what to do with this. I was myself only looking at it technologically. Then, with the principles which both of you was talking, just in the spirit of what that person said, that we want to use Hassan Bati's principles, not his mud. I was not too keen on using this in rural context. But this house did kind of strengthen my, capacities to be able to build in rural context. So this was my first project in Bombay, and I just built it in the Laurie Baker template. Improvising, there were at least 15 new things I did within that template, where we designed pillar slabs differently structurally. We used lime in the walls. We did a cantilever staircase in stone. So there were a lot of things. We did bay windows where we used stone in that instead of, so improving on the technique, the palette of techniques which we had from the Laurie Baker school. Here was the next project, and I just said, okay, enough. Let's get cement out of the system, and let's try it, because we were seeing buildings 100 years old. So we just introduced mud mortar in the walls. So the entire walls are standing on mud mortar. It's a G+1 reinforced slab building. Of course, it's a filler slab, which is because we stepped it. Another thing we did is we just waterproofed it with mangrove tiles. So the popular, again, there's a lot of kind of popular things that if you are doing mangrove tiles on an RCC slab, you are paying a pseudo environmental risk. But a BBC waterproofing costs me much more and is less effective. So I just make it also look, different. So we can afford some amount of deceit if you're doing something sensitive. So it's a mangrove tile, but actually has a waterproof. You will just see a kind of progression of different methodology as we have gone through. So all these projects are in more or less urban context, and so a lot of cement and concrete is used, although by improvising on it. This is in Artist Village, which Charles Square designed. We are now building new buildings, but they're small houses. So you have less space, less kind of food area. So you want to build thin walls. So we have very thin walls here. This whole building is just a 4-inch wall, ground +1, and even the beams are only 6 inches. So we take these. So within a set of materials and techniques, we try to push the envelope structure and trying to still conserve without plastering these walls. And so I was just trying to, here I was beginning to unfold, different ways of doing it. How to break the template. This was a commercial project, and really my first engagement with unburned bricks and wooden roofs. Baroda was different because I had not worked in this area before, but just followed the methodology of researching local building techniques, and we have exposed to it work. But we made a change. We made this building in lime. Also, when we were digging for this, it had some patch of black bottom soil. So this is a load-bearing building standing on a framed RCC foundation. So we did an RCC frame kind of pillar and beam kind of thing below with concrete blocks, because we didn't want to waste material. And then on top of it, it's a rotating in line and has a. I'm also sharing how I grew. Grew bolder with my experiments. And it has a rainwater harvesting tank, which is entirely custom line, and therefore healthier for use. That's the house from inside. You can see the courtyard for thermal aspects. Also, it has a water tank below it. Arches for beams. Very basic techniques to be able to avoid cement and steel, which are major polluters. Here's a chip. My interest in understanding ecological systems better, I took a postgraduate course in natural resource management and got to engage with farmers and then houses for them. So this was a house for a farmer in Vardha. And it's built entirely in traditional way. These are thick mud walls, 16 feet tall, of the core house here in the center, and then surrounded by the old house, and then surrounded by verandas, which also become rooms. This is the context of Palghar, where we're building. So this is our standard process where we document buildings in that area, plans, and the plan change sensitive allowed us to use the same template, the same planning template. In fact, insisted on us to use the same planning template to be able to make a house which would work for him. He was an aspiring farmer and now he's a successful one. This is just to understand the techniques and materials, and that's the house we built. So if you can see, this is the house, and the layout is using the same template, the same grid. But we tweaked it for an urban user who was trying to go rural. So it's the same grade, the same kind of columns and wooden pillars. It's a composite thing, these are all pillars. But we made these into verandas, 1, 2, 3. And this veranda, we made it into toilet. And these are all closed rooms. Also, what's interesting is we never we never needed to make computer drawings. And the drawings are only for us. When we were explaining to the workers, this was another kind of big move which happened in practice was that what we learned at Baker is we could not apply it. It was useless. So we also changed our methods of instruction. We did not have the trained workers which Laurie Baker's team has. So thanks to this whole machinery which he has, the whole political machinery which supported the cause of Costco and Laurie, and they have a whole team of workers, which also still at this current moment does not have local Malayali workers from Kerala. They have workers from those migrant workers from Odisha and so I was not going to go there. I didn't have a choice. I worked with local people because only they could do things which I did not have to teach. So it's an exercise in energy management. I have absolutely reduced my work. The instructions given to these people were just in terms of principles that leave 4 feet from every corner of the wall to make windows. Reduces my site visits. I have to issue no drawings. And the rest they know. I also use these as learning grounds. So this project was the first time I got to, because I documented so many timber buildings in the area, I ordered this entire woodwork myself, which generally we hand it over to a carpenter. Right, so I ordered this entire went. Further than that, I went to the sawmill and got this entire lot cut by myself, knowing every single scantling which goes waste. For the first time, I saw so many trees being used for the house I'm making, which made me question whether using thumb rules for designing this is the only way. So I got into a structural, kind of pursuit to how to design timber roofs. Because I had an environmental concern. And the environmental concern indirectly is a cultural concern. Because when people lose their resources, that's when they make different choices. This is the house, these are the verandas, this is the central core. I'm sorry I'll go quick because we are running late and I might disturb your schedules. This is the space, a bedroom where we decided not to make any walls above. Into another house. So learning from these kind of self-funded research programs in my practice. I apply them in further projects. Uh, that's another. It's a farmhouse now. Yes, sorry. That's a question. Uh, that's a farmhouse. It's gone commercial. It was supposed to be a house. It's gone commercial now, and she's doing very well. No steel, no cement in these houses. So I've managed to get rid of that, but with the approach to technique, which is completely based on the cultural practices like this. So we documented local houses, spoke to people, and first documented what they knew. Also, what you see here, this is town shape. This is near Lonavala. So you will not see any brick, up to a certain height. This is all stone walls. So the waves cannot hurt this house. But this is we just learned it from the people. And they know how to make the stone. So, what this does is not only keeps the economy local, rather than conserving age-old buildings, here is a kind of opportunity to conserve skills, to conserve entire cultural practices. What they know about stone is because they're engaged with stone in all its ways. And if you change that, then they don't know anything about the new materials, which is why you have a 300% factor of safety in RCC. One is you require, two is for bad material procurement, three is for bad workmanship. So you don't only end up, it's a hazardous material, you also end up paying 3 times because you're nervous. I mean, the damage is not land. So there's no cement or steel in these buildings. So these are, so I just quickly present. So that's wooden floor, wooden roof, etc., etc. The house from the other side. And here's a kind of intervention of doing an arch for this, for the entrance porch. A very symbolic thing which the lady, the owner had it. It was not like, what I call as a non-core cultural thing. It's supposed to denote something. Supposed to tell the people in that area that this is who we are. That arch is that porch is that. So, using some techniques which do not belong to the region, but with the materials which belong to that region and with skills which they can use, is what we feel is the way forward. So they're all completely local masons. There's the only thing exotic in the project is the architect. And this is my team, and these are architects. Another important point, I can stress here is that we took this kind of de-specializing. Because if you wanted to move from the high design tradition into the vernacular and the pre-literate, you wanted to be able to access what they know, and they only know by doing. So architect here can become a mason, a contractor, also a helper, sometimes your political agent in the region. So they would live in that place with the masons in their houses, be with them to kind of create something, make some acclimatization and to be able to do this project well. And what we also do here is, now that we moved out of the project, long after we moved out, the client still engages with these people directly. So we also forged some relations here. And we kind of generated a dialogue between the urban kind of person who comes there. It's like an alien insert. But if there is a dialogue, then there is a more, more potent, I think, relationship and future for these kind of developments. So we take lessons from these also. So one project helps another and kind of guides our methodology. Here I'm just demonstrating how we involve students in these processes, and I showed this earlier. And we take their kind of this whole thing that they're supposed to sit on a chair and design, and then they're not supposed to make their hands dirty. So another important part of technique is being able to do it. If you can't do it, your designing capacity is highly constrained. So we break that kind of mold also. This is the same space, and while we were doing it, that's another house in Kazakh. These are all the same type, weekend homes. And this is just about, well, the technical experiments. Entirely, once again, no cement. Cement would be in the tiling, finishing, entirely mud, mortar, local, pretty horrible bricks. Worst bricks we could use, but since they are the ones there, we use them. And if our logic is if we can do it in mud, then the most horrible brick is good enough. That's a kind of approach. I mean, there's a philosophical standpoint in technical choices. And what is interesting is how we get the clients to agree for this. So to me, therefore, the technical exploits are not so much to celebrate. Of course, these are arches entirely made in mud, ground plus one kind of building and stuff. We've grown up seeing Narigandhi's buildings, which are done like this in cement. So we do it in mud. So it was like these are exploits. Timber floors, timber roofs, extremely thermally efficient. So people believe they've entered an air-conditioned building unless they're told it is not. The building, just to show you, it's in mud. Another building of the same type, really. But it's the same type, so it really just will demonstrate similar kind of things. The technical experiments have, the larger achievements of technical experiments are what I already shared with you. These are just the demonstrations. Now here's another case of a farmer's house built with the community, but again using the same planning template which they already know. In this case, I have not even made a drawing. All I made was this model with them out of cardboard and twigs. And we just guided them with the foundation center lines because they were a bit unruly with that, but that was not necessary. And this building was done in 2 months, and we had hardly 3 visits. Just to tell you that, so these to explain to you how technique can be generated without much ado. So these wooden members they were just given a scale to measure this, and the trees behind were measured and cut, and the house was built with that. Within a month, the entire timber work was done. Okay. Completely local neighbor, the family who lived there got extended family to build the house very quickly. Of course, the ones who benefited were architects and the like from all over the world. Learn this because it is so special to them. The idea for us is to decentralize, to kind of just learn from them and to just facilitate rather than, and technique just falls in place. Technique is a part of a whole system of things to me. Of course, there are with the knowledge we acquire as technical experts, we tweak these a bit for slight modifications. We do that, but it's not the larger problem. That's a very small part of the problem. So that's an example. So that's a top wall, 9 inches. Even we have not heard of it before. But we strengthen it with using, that's a previous kind of thing, right? So that's mud only, that's top. So we have these brick piers at regular intervals, but we tie it all together with stone slabs so that there are shelves from inside the house and the building gets stronger. But you have to do it when you are building the building. Now that's a structural issue. And it's just kind of, working out a jugaad with what you have. I mean, putting together, first of all, really taking seriously what you have at your disposal. So this mud is from the side. And anyone could be taught to build. So we taught people came for the workshop. They also paid the owners of the clothes as a good deal. That's the wood for wood. I have not visited the site even once when this thing was happening. And the model was given only for the main frame. Only for the main frame. Everything else they knew. And that was also not necessary. Actually, this was just kind of having them, reinforcing their own belief in the systems which they know. And we just kind of interjected and left. Reducing, and and therefore also making this kind of practice affordable. I mean, here's an example of housing for the masses, by the masses. I mean, there are problems of a different scale, but I really seriously question what are the factors which create those scales of problems and therefore need for such scales of housing. I wouldn't, be like an end user who's only supposed to solve problems which other people create. I would question why they create that problem and work in an area where they are creating other problems. That's the larger section of it in my head. That's a celebrating after it is done. Thank you.
It was a elaborate presentation. Is there any questions that the presentation takes?
Yes.
Yeah. Very interesting presentation and very illuminating also. There's one question I have is how do the economics of these buildings play out when you compare with the RCC or other strategies which are used more widely because of easier because they're cheaper.
Yes. So it changes proportionately in different regions and different contexts. So if you're doing it in an urban context, it is different, but the proportions are quite the same. So we have done buildings as economical as 300 rupees a square feet. And you know that even in the villages, the cost of an RCC building doesn't go below 700 to 800 rupees. That's if, the kind of RCC which, so there's a vernacular RCC also. They use RCC very differently. They don't use RCC with the 3 times safety factor we use and we're trained to use here. So they use it in a very optimized way. All the sizes are not more than 9 inches by 9 inches. And still, we can save a lot. We can make the building cheaper by 50%. But more important is, to us, is the environmental cost which we reduce, and secondly is what we're conserving in terms of skills. And also, in a way, it's we are propagating the hidden kind of shortcomings of these materials, the problems with these materials which nobody tells them. So we also take up that job. So those are our kind of benefits, apart from just saving money.
There is this filmmaker Kathleen or Buster Keaton, and their whole critique or play with architecture that makes us laugh is that objects around the world doesn't fit in or go small or go big or become very strange like a gun that piano become very big. So, and that object world, once we find them, the machinery would become very extremely big, the gates are very huge. So they produce this kind of vortex where the object world and the human produce a very discomforting relationship. In the theoretical schema that you build, there is almost the human is without objects. There is something called the human people, and then there is the built form. And I said you are just going to inhabit that built form. And I'm just wondering because most of the architecture, even if you take a airport, factory, these are objects imagined into a place that human comes much later. So there is most of our contemporary architecture spell that spells us into.
True.
So I was just wondering whether this kind of working out the vernacular to the idea of the people doesn't allow us to enter the critical space which we are trying to enter of the kind of a overall critique of the ecological ideas or the framework within which architecture is to do. Because it doesn't take the idea of the post-human complete enmeshed relationship to objects.
Yes. So yes, I agree with you completely. So I agree with this contrast between my. I'm at peace with the way I look at these things and with the people who I work with, and I don't feel lacking at all with not kind of
agreeing with what you're saying or what people really uh, talk about and the way they think about it. Because engaged with this discourse during my formal education. And when I have worked with people, it's almost like a renaissance, you know. So most of the world never knew it happened, and they don't care. So I've stopped worrying about those things because this affects and it's the discussion of a very few people. How I would look at it is uh, its capacity to affect a large number of people as a discourse, and which I have my viewpoint on, and which is completely opposed to that. In that sense, it is important to me, but I don't feel like ascribing to it at all. Uh, and I feel that most of the users I'm working with, uh, I mean, they have questions like, and many buildings which have been built, in that scheme of thought, have been questioned by people, and they've changed them completely because the designer's meaning and the user's meanings are very different, very often, especially when you're doing public work. If you're doing a personal work for yourself, maybe not. If you're building for people, there have been many projects where people have gone into buildings which are beautiful, I mean, hailed as beautiful, but they don't mean much to the people who are working in them, living. So they go ahead and make changes, and the people are criticized. Oh, you touched this masterpiece. Oh, it is saying so much. It is doing so much in whichever sense, amongst one of the senses which you mentioned. To me, it is still more important of what a larger section of people feel about, how they look at the environment, and basically how they feel. So therefore, how it affects the built environment or architecture. I'm more interested in that. It's a conscious choice. So it's not like, it's not. I'm not ignoring that. I'm choosing to differ.
Okay. Since I'm not work, but since I'm in this state of practice, I just had this question about how do you management question, but how do you manage? Because initially, what was your involvement in a particular house? As to now, what is it? Because you are also into teaching. So I was also wanted to know what kind of man work, like who's your architect or from an architect's aid, like how much is it, like 5 days a week or something? Is it that intensive?
Yes, it's a very good question. I did not take it up because we were not so much speaking of techniques in practice in this lecture, but that's a huge part of the success of this. So, and Rishi asked me this question because he has worked with me, and many of the experiments we have done have been post you have been around. So I know why you asked this question. So we have worked out methods where the architect uh, now goes and lives amongst the people who build the places, lives with them, eats with them, in fact, works with them to learn the techniques alongside. And it's a constructive practice, if I may call it. So details happen because we spoke to somebody like this yesterday. So we look at the importance of techniques in a systemic way. So we have now identified systems in which we want to intervene in the least possible way, in the most gentle way. So the architect now we kind of despecialize, we break that thing. So has to work like a contractor. So you immediately enter into the realm of the vernacular. Has to work if necessary as a mason. So the architects are now trained only like that. So we do not accept or we only accept people who are willing to break those things. Yes.
Also, that part of the thing, how much is a formal local contractor into the building of the house? Since more unconventional a house becomes in terms of materials and techniques, they would not want to put their feet in it as per what I have experienced. So, what kind of is like the masonry is done by a contractor and the roof is a separate contractor, or
Rooms is managed by, like you are the contractor for the project.
Yes.
Is the setting done that way? Also, that is one. And other question is how do you develop your intuition for seeing, because local cannot be like, it's not a monolith thing. A local is good, and once you go into that realm, you will meet
Absolutely.
enthusiastic people. There are all sorts of people everywhere. Yes. So how do you intuitively train yourself to understand, for example, a person, a mason, a contractor? Because I was not trained to that, so I don't know. कोई मुझे बोलेगा कि मेरा इधर मोनोपोली है तो मैं ही बनाएगा. I will not gather strength to like I'll do something.
Very good point. Very good point. So that's a very good point. Again, look. Again, I must highlight that the questions you are asking me are largely a social aspect of the technique. How do you achieve certain techniques through social engineering, if I may put it? So what we do is, when we say we are the contractor, what we do is we eliminate the local contractor who does not really know anything about this work, who has by now forgotten the techniques, the traditional techniques. So we eliminate that person and we just take that kind of political position as a contractor. But knowledge, so if you see most of these projects, we are not teaching the contractor workers anything. We are tweaking things, and if at all, we are just kind of saying that, look at your house. So if that person has not built a mud wall, we just tell him, please look at your house. And believe me, we have to do that. And I mean, you have to just tell him, aren't you forgetting something? I mean, this is our engagement with the workers. So we absolutely, in a way, we don't, tweak things beyond, unless the project needs it for some great purpose. We don't tweak it beyond the set of, or the template of skills which the people have. We are on the palette of materials which are existing in that. So we will play with those materials, but they know masonry. So classic example is what we did in Palghar. So what we documented, we saw from thatch, from wattle of walls, people had directly jumped to brick walls in cement mortar, one brick walls in cement mortar. So what we knew that they have acquired the knowledge of brickwork, but do they need burnt brick? So we designed a building which should perform beautifully and not fail if we use unburned bricks. But they had acquired the skill of laying bricks, so we didn't teach them anything. All we had to do is, provide some solace that don't worry, it's our responsibility, this wall will not fall. Just go ahead and do it. Their only apprehension was, oh, but the brick is not burnt. And now that's what I think we are trained for. And we can apply our understanding of climatology, of structural design to be able to do this. So tweaking in a very gentle, in a very minimal way, where we don't have to end up teaching people anything. And that's the only way really I've been able to do anything at all. Because if I wanted to use techniques and skills where I was teaching people, then firstly, it would be so expensive. I would have to manage a team of my own, so I don't use any single team anywhere again. These are all completely, so we are doing the whole day, reinventing the wheel everywhere over and over again. The only thing is we get better at that. We are learning how to break that cultural code better. So all this research which you're seeing is in that direction of how to negotiate with people, how to really build relations so that they can trust us enough to listen to us. I mean, really is that. Technology is not what we really, pursue. So therefore, that problem does not arise where, we are teaching anybody anything. And therefore, we also don't have that regular intimidation which, the contractors so we are like contractors, right? So the local people, the material suppliers come, take material from us, or we will dire consequences. Take workers from us, or we will do this, do that. That's what architects face, don't they? Because the build form will emerge later. But first, till the building is built, they think it's a building done by a specialist who's come from the city. But when they say take things from us, take skilled people from us, take materials from us, we say, please give. These are the rates. If you are better than your neighbor, we'll take it from you. So in fact, we are loved by the people over there. Because we allow or we engage them in an economic competitive process. And we have to be as smart as we have to be. We have to be extremely humble while doing this. So once again, breaking that position of the architect and coming down, although we can't feign ignorance, we are not
the local engineer or contractor. We are architects, so we have to, so I feel that this probably also would be able to generate different techniques.
One technical question: in one of the Karjan houses, there was this arch, I think 2 brick thick arch, and the first, I think it was 3 courses. The top 2 were like interlock, and the bottom course was just horizontal bricks running this way. I tried doing that in one of the houses, and halfway the masons were kind of lost confidence, and it becomes very difficult for an architect or the team who is making it to reinstill faith once the masons gave up and came for So I was just wondering what was the first course? I think it's the Kardat house. The first course is going horizontally, and the second 2 courses are interlocked like normal 1.5.
So the trick is you build one course at a time. You build a complete arch of the first course first. That will stay by any standards.
And clearly mud or mud lime and
this is only mud. This is only mud. Lime, the lime in it is only for termites, to take care of termites. Lime, that's another kind of myth which comes very easily in technique, where you can put all kinds of additives to these natural biomass materials to make them stronger. So somebody who did, again, is Gernot Minker, who did this in the University of Kassel. He's been researching on mud for the last 30 years. He broke this entire, Earth architecture symposium. It kind of, he just turned it on his head by saying that you're actually destroying the Earth's mud mortar by adding additives to it. So it's absolutely not necessary. But you need to be able to gauge whether it's a good mortar or not.
And the arch goes like this. That's the technical thing. The arch is like 0 mortar at the bottom. It becomes
Yes.
And the pointing that we see is secure. The pointing
is the pointing is now a classic case of this non-core cultural denotative thing, which the client needed for a sense of security. So the line pointing, and we chose lime over cement because obviously they're both coming from the same place. So why not use a lesser embodied energy, lesser process kind of thing, and of course lesser toxic thing. So we use lime, and it's only line pointing is just to be able to kind of put the client at peace that the mud mortar will not erode. But technically, it's not necessary at all. So the Palghar house, etc., has no line pointing. There are buildings which are only mud, forget any kind of pointing. So it's absolutely not necessary. Yes. No. So you are never taught, and you are never taught how to build an arch. Okay. So these are the kind of things which are going out of the curriculum, right? So no, you're never taught. So what the role which you're saying has been taught about brickwork. So I had to take a specialized course in arch making from Oregon with Satprem, and then trying out a lot of things on my own. And each arch has to go by itself, unless you cut voussoirs, right? So each of your brick has to be shaped. Then you can negotiate that with bonding between 2 courses. But otherwise, you're going to have a very thick mortar at the end, right? 0 point below and very thick mortar at the end. You don't want to do that, because the more you rely on the mortar, the more chances of that arch masonry failing. So when you're not able to do that, you don't have voussoirs, then you treat each course by itself. Always. There is no mud by itself. Bakerji said mud is like your wife. Everyone has a different, I'm sorry, that's very sexist, but it's a wrong example to say. But the point is that, different places have different mud. All right. So you have to treat that mud on its merit. You cannot use the same thing everywhere. You cannot use the same formula, and that's a classic thing of what I've been doing with Baker's. So we didn't use any of the techniques for what they were used in that context. So we've been tweaking it as and where. So you have a lateritic soil, of course, the fineness of the grain, etc., etc. There's so many parameters. So if you engage in that, I suggest you come for the International Symposium on Earth Architecture next year to ISC Bangalore. That will be one great exposure. to this, and you are welcome to my sites, which you could not go when you were working with me. But you're welcome anytime. Please come when we're doing an arch, or join us at C when we're doing it with the students here. They have done optimized arches of 3-4 kinds, optimized to reduce the cross section in the center. You're welcome to join. Anytime.
We take one last question. So this question is regarding the systems. Like when we are talking about the decentralizing the whole system, like whenever we are taught the kind of centralized system of construction like RCC and state, because it is everywhere. But here it is where you go into the local context and you identify all the cultural systems, the people, and then we actually build with that context. But many times as an architect, see, many times we, so it is, for example, when it is like always start from zero. Like we have some knowledge, but every time it start from zero and it consumes a lot of time as well. So as a we are still in a competitive world, or maybe we are, as a practitioner, it is sometimes very it is the kind of time which we are providing the project, the kind of demand which is created by the client also to go about that fast pace and everything. So, how as an architect or as an expert of some knowledge, with some knowledge of construction technology, we address these issues.
So thanks. I think your questions have brought out a lot of things which I could not speak in that format of the lecture. So what happens is that once you're doing certain things in a region with similar cultural matrices, right? The political, socio-economic situations, the skill set which people have, the materials which you have at your disposal. Once you're doing it at a particular place, there are so many lessons which you learn, and you apply them. So there's never you have to reinvent the wheel more and more internally than in these outer. And if I may say so, at the level of your theoretical lens, your worldview, these are the reinventings which really happen over experience, not of technique or of so because you're already investing so much initially, and people you're already cracking so many codes, then you're cracking very different codes which don't consume that kind of energy or that much energy. Then you're going to slightly to conceptual levels. You're trying to look across various practices and experiments and what you have learned from that, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel in really in the technical terms. That will become very easy.
Okay, I would invite you to kind of ask Malak informally because we are actually very late today. But thank you, Malak. I think one of the things that I gathered from the conversation, your conversation with the students, is that it's very helpful to kind of place your practice between the schism that occurs in the assumption of the theoretical knowledge that we get in the class and the practical things that happen on site. And I think it's very valuable to then kind of use your learning to actually place oneself in practicing or kind of physically manifesting our ideas on site. So thank you so much. I'm sure that there are a lot of people who will have many more final questions, and you will be happy to address them. While we all disassemble. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for our lecture, and thank you all for joining us. Our next CCT event is scheduled to take place on the 22nd of August. That is 2 weeks from now. So, September. And please join us again for another very engaging conversation. Thank you so much.